Once upon a time in the history of God's chosen people, there was uncertainty. There were no prophecies, no visions, and everything was in a state of chaos. It seemed as if there was a dark cloud hovering over the whole country. Outside the tabernacle, people oppressed the weak and powerless. God's children fought against each other. Innocent blood was shed, lives were lost. And this seemed to be the order of the day. Well, inside the tabernacle, things got worse and worse. Hophni and Phinehas, priest Eli's sons, were corrupt and arrogant, and their father never confronted them even though God had warned him again and again. But God had a plan. And at this time, he caused Hannah to give birth to the miracle baby called Samuel, and she brought him back to the Lord just as she had promised. Samuel grew into a diligent young man, whose duty it was to keep the holy place tidy and open the doors of the temple at the start of each day. While Samuel increased in strength each day, Eli's grew older and could only see partially. So Samuel became his right hand, leading him when he needed to move around. Although Eli was slowly losing use of his eyes, he could hear the commotion. He knew that his sons were at fault, and for the first time in his life, he summoned them. They claimed to be sorry, but the same thing continued to happen. In fact, behind his back they laughed at him, while they made a feast of the stolen meat. And the darkness over the land grew thicker and thicker because the Lord could no longer trust Eli and his sons to do his commandments. As much as people prayed for God to change the state of the nation, they could hear nothing from God. Many began to pray for a new leader, one who would fear and honor God, and soon enough God heard their prayers. Every night before bed, Eli would tell Samuel story after story of the miracles God had done for Israel in the past. And Samuel would wonder aloud why such miracles had become rare, a question for which Eli had no answer. The thought worried Samuel so much that he prayed that God would once again speak through Eli, who was also Israel's leader at that time, and make everything all right again. Only if Samuel knew that God had found a vessel in him. The first time God called Samuel, he thought it was Eli, so he ran to him, afraid the old man might be in need of help to relieve himself. He fell into a deep sleep quickly, but when God called the second time, his sleep left him. Yet again, he assumed it was Eli. When it happened the third time, Eli knew that it had to be God. This time, he told Samuel exactly how to respond. Samuel wanted to stay up so that God would find him awake when he called again, but he slept off before he knew it. True to Eli's words, God called again. And the things God told Samuel made it difficult for him to find sleep after many days. After Samuel received his first prophecy from the Lord, he hid in his room, afraid of how the priest might respond to it. But then, Hannah made a trip to Shiloh to see her son and encouraged him to be a faithful messenger of God. Even though Hannah encouraged Samuel, he still felt bad about telling his mentor, his friend, that something bad would soon befall him. Eli, however, was desperate to hear what God had to say after these many years of silence. He pressed Samuel, and Samuel spoke. On hearing Samuel's words, he knew he was wrong to raise his sons the way that he did, but he did not want to expel them from the priesthood because he feared that they would hate him. So he accepted God's verdict. That night Samuel could not sleep. He felt so bad that it had to be him who gave such a prophecy, but God comforted him. That night, Samuel made up his mind. He would be God's instrument for as long as God would have him. It was a long time after, but God's word did come to pass. At another battle with the Philistines, both of the priest's sons died in one day, and the Ark of God was taken away. To the Philistines, it was just a trophy from the war, but to the children of Israel, it was a strong symbol of the presence of the Lord. When word reached Eli that both his sons had died in battle, Eli fell from a stool and broke his neck. Samuel heard the sound of the fall and came out to find him dying. Samuel wept for his friend. The word of the Lord had come to pass. The Philistines returned the Ark of God to Israel in peace, and God's children rejoiced to have God's presence among them again. And so the dark clouds disappeared. God's people could hear his voice again. The wars ended and the people lived in peace and plenty again. All these and more, God did through the hands of one little boy who heard God